Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be talking about some of the red flags I picked up on whilst reading Ted Bundy's longtime girlfriend's Elizabeth Kloepfer's account of their relationship that she wrote about in her book called The Phantom Prince: My Life with Ted Bundy. While I don't get into the details of the horrific crimes that took place, I do caution that the subject matter, mainly its context, is disturbing. February 16, 1978, Elizabeth Kloepfer received a phone call from Bundy from Pensacola, Florida, after he had been arrested for driving a stolen vehicle after escaping a Colorado jail. He initially refused to give authorities his real identity because at this point he had already been convicted of kidnapping and assault of Carol DeRanche, had been charged with the murder of Karen Campbell, and had been suspected of murders in the Seattle area, Utah, Colorado, and now Florida. During this phone call, this would be the closest that Bundy ever came to confessing to his then ex-girlfriend Liz. The conversation went as follows. I'm going to read it to you. He said, "I was afraid you would have nothing to do with me if I told you." His voice was so weary that I started to cry. "Didn't you always think that it was possible?" "No," I said. "I didn't think it could be true. I had my doubts, but I just couldn't accept it. Sometimes I wondered if it was me, that you hated me and wanted to kill me. No, there's something the matter with me." What stood out for me from this conversation is when she said, "I just couldn't accept it," and when he said, "Didn't you always think it was possible?" He's basically asking her, you had all this data on me that you've collected over the years. Didn't you think that it could be me? Or knowing me, didn't you think that I was capable of doing something like this? But Liz did know, because she would be the one who called the police on him many times, but they chose to ignore her because he just simply didn't fit the profile of the man that they were looking for. But Liz called the police when she could no longer ignore the very obvious coincidences, when she knew that the perpetrator's name was Ted, that he drove a Volkswagen Bug, that he sounded like he had a British accent and wore very expensive-looking tennis clothes, and that he had crutches and a cast just like the ones she saw in Bundy's room. So their conversation got me into thinking if there were any less obvious signs that were there all along, which would have been an indicator that something was indeed very wrong with him. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the red flags I picked up on from Liz's book that I believe were there even before the murders began. But before getting into that, I'll briefly touch on Bundy's and Liz's background and on how they met. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell to Eleanor Louise Cowell on November 24, 1946, at a home for unwanted mothers in Burlington, Vermont, and his father's identity has never been confirmed. For the first 3 years of his life, he lived in Philadelphia, the home of his maternal grandparents, who raised him as his own son to avoid the social stigma that accompanied births outside of wedlock. So family, friends, and the young Bundy himself were told that his grandparents were his real parents and that his mother was his older sister. Bundy eventually discovered the truth, but because he loved to lie about every possible thing, we don't really know how this happened. He told Liz that a cousin showed him his birth certificate. He told biographers that he found the certificate himself. And a source close to Bundy says that he found the certificate himself in 1969 when he was already 23 years old. I find it interesting that when it comes to Bundy, people tend to overlook his childhood as a contributing factor to his psychopathy when there are reports that there was abuse within the household, when he grew up thinking that his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister, and when he did express resentment towards his mother for lying to him and never talking to him about his real father. But anyways, In 1950, Louise changed her last name from Cowell to Nelson and moved from Philadelphia with her son to live in Tacoma, Washington. In 1951, she met Johnny Bundy, a hospital cook whom she later married that year, and Johnny formally adopted Ted as his son. We also have varied accounts of his social life growing up. He told certain interviewers that he chose to be alone because he wasn't capable of understanding interpersonal relationships, but he told others that he was always very well known and very well liked. He later attended the University of Puget Sound, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, and later transferred to the University of Washington, where he graduated with an undergrad in psychology, which is just so ironic. He was also involved with a classmate who's commonly referred to as Stephanie Brooks, and he took part in several Republican campaigns throughout his studies. It is also believed that he found out the truth about his father around the time that Stephanie ended their relationship in 1969. Now a little bit on Liz's background. Elizabeth Kloepfer was originally from Ogden, Utah. She got married and had a baby in college, but she explained that her husband really wasn't ready to settle down at the time, which is why their marriage didn't survive. She wanted to get married again and she wanted to have more children, and she thought Seattle would be a great place to settle down. In 1969, she decided to move from Utah to Seattle with her daughter, Molly. She found an apartment right away, and she got a job as a secretary at the University of Washington Medical School. She would drop off Molly at the daycare in the mornings, and she would head off to work. Her colleagues described her as being wide-eyed and innocent at this time, and she was just so excited about her new life in this new great place. One night, Liz and her friend decided to go to a tavern, and she explained that as soon as she walked in, she saw a really good-looking man sitting across from her. After eyeing each other down for some time, he walked over to her, asked her to dance, and they talked and danced briefly. After some time, she walked over to him, and she told him that he looks as if his best friend had just died. He jokingly asked if that's how folks from Utah talk, and they went on to have a lengthy conversation over drinks. She asked him to spend the night at her place, but nothing happened between them that night, and in the morning he made breakfast for her and her daughter. But after this night, they started to date. Ted would spend the night at their place, they would make dinner together, he would drive Liz to work in the morning and Molly to her daycare, and he would show off his favorite places in Seattle. Ted and Liz took a trip to Vancouver, British Columbia, and he really seemed to be enjoying the domestic lifestyle with Liz and her daughter. She really thought they had become a family, and she thought he was initially great with her daughter. He would read to her, he would play with her, tickle her, and on the weekends they'd watch cartoons together as Liz would sleep in. They would also spend a lot of time with Ted's younger brother, Rich Bundy. The four of them would often go rafting, and Rich explained that he really loved his older brother, that he thought he was so great, he really looked up to him, and he thought he could do no wrong. Ted's instructor of abnormal psychology described Ted as being a neat and clean-looking guy, and he really took a liking to him, so much so that he would often say that he wished one of his own daughters would go on to marry a guy just like Ted. He was able to impress his professors so much that he got several recommendations to work on a crime prevention project in Seattle. He was working alongside businessmen, lawyers, professors, and psychologists on this crime prevention project, and they were all really impressed and charmed by him. So the first red flag that I think was definitely apparent was his superficial charm. Ted had the ability to become whoever you needed him to be, which is why he was so well liked by so many people across social circles. He became the seemingly perfect boyfriend to Liz, the ideal father figure for Molly, and the impressive student to his professors. While there's nothing wrong with being charming, he used his charm to manipulate others for his own gain and benefit. As the reader, you notice that just as Ted was able to become extremely charming when he wanted something, he was equally capable of detaching himself completely once he got it. I think this is a huge indicator that the charm is fake and superficial, and that it was there all along. I think this line in the book captures it well. She writes, "When I felt his love, I was on top of the world. When I felt nothing from Ted, I felt that I was nothing." I think that he used his charm to make his victims feel more at ease or comfortable enough so that they would get in his car or go to the alley with him or whatever the case may have been. But I think it's a skill set that he worked on for a very long time, and that it was definitely apparent before the crimes began. The second red flag, which would have indicated something was very wrong with him, and that was definitely there prior to the crimes began, was his continuous need for stealing. While stealing on its own doesn't mean much, in this case it begins to mean something. Ted presented a very clean-cut image of himself to the world, so this clean-cut image was definitely inconsistent with who he really was. He would steal everything, from textbooks to clothes to skiing equipment, tools, and Liz even found out that he would steal their Christmas presents. She also found out that he was extremely proud of himself of being able to do it, and that he was only doing it for the sheer enjoyment he got out of getting away with con. I've heard many commentators make the point that Ted was unique in that he didn't have a criminal past, but the truth is that he did, and a progression of his crimes can be traced to stealing, to beating women, to kidnapping and killing. While stealing on its own may not mean much, I think in this case it shows that his true persona, not the one he was presenting to the world, really enjoyed getting away with con, and that stealing played a major role in his need and desire to progress the crime further. Another red flag that was definitely there before the crimes began, and it was kind of a major one, was that he always lied. He was a pathological liar. It was in his nature to con, lie, and deceive people, and Liz was definitely always being lied to. He lied about going to law school. He would cheat and lie to her throughout their entire relationship. He lied about his cousin telling him about his father, and he was even engaged to another woman during their relationship. While little white lies may not mean much, in this case, I think it's clear that he used lying as a way to conceal his true identity and intentions, and so that he could effectively manipulate people. The fourth red flag that was likely there all along was that he had a shallow affect, meaning that he did not have appropriate emotional responses to certain situations. On a number of occasions, Liz described a situation where she would be getting extremely heated and upset and raising her voice over something, and he just remained extremely calm. Even in situations that warranted an emotional response, he just remained completely unaffected. I actually looked at all the instances where Liz talked about Ted crying, and it was always about something that pertained to him. He cried about not getting into law school, about not doing well in school, and right before he had to go to trial. So again, I think his inability to respond to situations appropriately or to situations that warranted an emotional response is a sign that something was wrong. The fifth red flag I picked up on was that Bundy had a constant need for stimulation. While there's nothing wrong with being bored and it doesn't make someone a criminal, Bundy would do odd things to amuse himself that, when understood within the context of what happens, it becomes quite eerie. One day when he and Liz went rafting, he pushed her into the cold and rough waters without warning. She explained that he didn't laugh it off or offer a helping hand, but that he watched her struggle to get back into the raft and stared at her with a blank look on his face as if he was completely gone. Given that 8 days later, he abducted and killed 2 young women at Lake Sammamish, Denise Naslund and Janice Ott, events like this one become extremely eerie, and I think they're an indicator that something was indeed wrong. Bundy confessed to killing 30 women, but experts believe the number is closer to 100. It's absolutely horrific what this individual did. He took the lives of so many young, beautiful, smart women who had bright futures ahead of them and who were extremely excited about life. Bundy was executed on January 24th, 1989, and he died in Florida State Prison. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting or informative. If you did, please like and subscribe, and have a great day.